What's up, guys? Today I'm checking out this Digital Foundry video on Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, showing it off on the PS5 Pro. I'm actually pretty excited to see differences. Granted, I mean, this dislike to like ratio already isn't looking good. It probably, I don't know, we'll see. I'm excited to see the differences in this game. To be honest, this is the only game that is out at right this current time that I am excited for in terms of like PS5 Pro differences. A lot of the other games are either on PC or they already looked relatively well on a base PS5. This game in particular, its performance mode definitely had issues.
Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is a highly acclaimed game,
So let's see what we got.
A very good looking one. Packing incredible character modeling, highly detailed open world environments, and beautiful particle-filled combat, the game certainly had some very strong visual highs. But the title was let down by poor image quality in its performance mode, with lower rendering resolutions and a blurry final resolve. Those issues have lingered since the game's release, but the upcoming PS5 Pro promises to greatly overhaul the game's soft and imprecise image.
Oh my god.
Pro footage released by Sony shows off 60 FPS gameplay with greatly improved, sharper looking rendering, providing a Final Fantasy VII Rebirth experience with far less compromise. So how does this new footage compare
it looks significantly better.
PS5 performance and graphics mode options? And can it sustain a stable 60 FPS, even with the additional visual detail?
Bro, it's crazy because
Our 7-minute sample of FF7 Rebirth is an uninterrupted sequence.
Does it like look better?
Chapter 2, the first gameplay segment set in an open world.
Like it just straight up looks better than the graphics mode. It looks better than it ever looked while it's running at double the frame rate.
Just like the PS5's performance mode.
Like graphics mode didn't even look this good. And this, oh man,
impressive fidelity the PS5 Pro is capable of. It's delivering a crisp, sharp 4K image, a far cry from the blurry and imprecise 1080p-like rendering featured on the base console at the same time imprecise 1080p-like rendering.
Bro, this looks like a Switch port. Oh my god. Bro, this actually looks like a Switch port. It looks like it could have ran on like a PS4.
Featured on the base console at the same 60 FPS
upload. Man.
We can make out far more detail across the environment, especially in high-frequency texture detail and fine pops of foliage. Skin texture is really shiny,
with a
crazy sheen on Barret here, revealing poor detail that was smeared before. You can actually make out strands of hair on Tifa here, though of course the hair is still card-based, and dithering has been minimized.
Okay, it's still card-based.
Some of the quirks of FF7 Rebirth,
I mean, that's probably the best they could have done.
Have been fixed. Like how ghosting is no longer really an issue.
I do hope that they could like figure out a way to
ugly trails of duplicated detail.
Implement a different hair system
nearly as much during this footage.
Kind of like the
some moments I did spot
Resident Evil games do.
Ghosting.
Where like you can change the setting to
oddly transparent.
You can completely change the hair rendering.
Solid,
at least
stable look on Pro. If we step into gameplay, which I tried to match as best as possible here, the same advantages continue to be evident. FF7 Rebirth packs a lot of geometry into every frame, boasting primitive shader-powered polygonal detail, and the PS5 Pro simply handles this much better than the base console. Ghosting on camera movement is much harder to spot on the Pro as well.
Ghosting was crazy on the performance mode. It was bad on the graphics mode too, but it was crazy.
Muddy look overall. PS5 Pro handles this scene impressively. Much better.
I actually have not played a video game with like as much ghosting as this game had
even in
like a long time.
Combat scenes. The motion blur also looks quite pristine and is relatively artifact-free. Particle effects look generally good in motion, though some freeze frames reveal a slight chunkiness relative to the rest of the presentation. That's probably because Rebirth appears to be using PSSR, or PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution, which is Sony's new machine learning-based upsampling solution exclusive to PS5 Pro consoles. PS5 Pro packs a substantial increase in GPU grunt, but the cost of native 4K rendering would likely overwhelm the enhanced console. Instead, Square Enix has opted for this upsampling solution.
What's the base resolution?
Internal resolution of roughly 1152p or 1224p in my counts, to a 4K final result.
That's a pretty strong increase.
1080p and as high as 1296p. Though if we were able to get our own capture here, we might be able to see some greater variability. That's
I wonder if the Pro allow for like kind of a native,
which hit comparable resolution
or closer to native resolution if you want to.
The difference here is on PS5, the game didn't use any form of temporal upsampling, instead taking that final rendered image and simply upscaling it, perhaps using a bilinear or bicubic upscaling solution. The game's final resolve also appeared oddly soft, lacking detail relative to some other games with similar resolutions. Square Enix also offered a performance sharp mode, which used a different upscaling method that produced sharper results, albeit with some additional blockiness. Preferences here are a matter of personal taste, but neither option offered the kind of image clarity that most other 60 FPS games on consoles are capable of delivering.
It was just such a step below literally every other game's performance mode.
Enables Square Enix to hit greatly.
I really wish they at least could have used FSR
with the game
too.
Now genuinely looking like a title rendered at a much higher resolution. At least some elements of the post-processing though, like the motion blur, appear to be rendered at a full 4K here, which helps to keep the game looking clean in animation packed.
Oh, that's gonna look so good during some of those cutscenes.
Outside of the image quality boost, the visual outcomes are a little more mixed. As far as I can tell, key underlying visual settings appear to be a match for the PS5 code. Shadow resolution, for instance, appears very similar, with very short in close ranges, but greatly lowered resolution everywhere else.
That sucks. That's some of the stuff I wanted them to change.
Matched footage as well, suggesting there's been no change to that setting. Pop-in was annoying on PS5 already, and it's more apparent at this higher resolution. Plus, textures appear very similar, with the same occasional bits of low-res.
Textures are similar too.
Some deeper
I assume textures would be similar, but I would hope they would have
gone unaddressed. Foliage often.
I would have hoped that they would have improved like the shadow casting in general. Maybe at least it'll have a better range, because the shadows in this game weren't great. They weren't great. Shadow system, whatever shadow solution that they used in Final Fantasy 16 was better than this game. Like this game, shadow solution is not great. I really wish they could have at least had the ability, maybe if they were on Unreal Engine 5, that they could use like virtual shadow maps or something. But yeah, it's a shame. The shadow solution in this game is always not great.
Aren't effectively grounded with shadows, either with shadow maps, screen space shadows, or something more far-flung like an RT technique, so they don't have a very natural appearance. I didn't see any evidence that the game's indirect lighting has been improved either, though to be fair, the quality of the GI was less of a concern in these directly lit open spaces. We don't have any footage of areas where the indirect lighting was more questionable, like in artificial city spaces. That's maybe a bit too much of an ask though, given the game's vintage at this point, and the fact that using PSSR to reach 4K 60-like rendering on PS5 Pro seems to pick up much of the extra grunt available on the console.
That's more disappointing, to be honest.
Preliminary footage from games like Spider-Man
if there are no improvements in the other areas,
which run at similar or identical.
It's just like not utilizing anything that the Pro increased, right?
PSSR upscaling carries a significant cost, as does using full resolution post-processing, which isn't mandated for every game, but is suggested as a best practice by Sony. Obviously though, the visual results are what matters, and there the PS5 Pro handily bests the OG PS5 console.
That might be a big deal. Yeah, so it would seem that for this upgrade is not increasing other aspects of the game, which is pretty disappointing, because I don't think that's 100% true, because they did show like Zack in the slums. It might be this specific build that doesn't have other increases, because they did show Zack in the slums in the church, and that had completely different lighting. The lighting was significantly better, and the lighting actually it was like proper subsurface scattering. The light was actually peering into Zack's skin, and you can see it illuminating and changing the color like value of his skin. So I do think they probably do have they have changes to settings. We're just not seeing them yet. Maybe in this build. But as far as it's gone, or as far as this video has shown, is that this build only really is showing the PSSR improvements, right? Which for a game like this is already a massive difference for a game like this. I just hope that they utilize other stuff, essentially, because we all knew that they were going to use the upscaler. It would make no sense. The upscaler is kind of going to be like that, where it's like, why wouldn't a developer use that? You know, it essentially is just more performance at the same or better image quality.
Are promising, but perhaps somewhat flattering for the much more capable Pro hardware. So what about the base console's graphics mode? This mode targeted 30 FPS and typically rendered at or close to a full 4K resolution, with Unreal's TAA used to clean up the image. Rebirth on Pro is delivering a typically rendered at or close to a full 4K targeted 30 FPS and typically rendered at or close to a full 4K resolution, with Unreal's TAA
close to 4K. I can see that, yeah.
Rebirth on Pro is delivering a comparable image overall, I'd say, though there are some differences. In the opening cutscene, the same issue with the distant trees pops up again with the base console footage, while the Pro delivers a more realistic result. The screen space reflections don't look that great in either view.
Man, Nanite would have been so good for this stuff.
A slightly better result here. Ghosting is also less of an issue on the Pro. In terms of actual rendered detail,
I understand if they would have made this game on
despite its much lower resolution. Just
Unreal Engine 5, it would have essentially taken like at least a year longer to come out.
Red 13
we wouldn't be playing this until next year.
The graphics mode on PS5 looks good.
I think the wait would have probably been worth it, because a lot of this game's like rendering problems would have been solved by
while the Pro suffers from some odd shimmer,
like UE5.
Slightly strange
and I'm glad with Black Myth Wukong we have like more of an example as to a UE5 game.
It's a bit of a trade-off
that's like out and it's
more
running,
detail,
and it runs well on consoles.
Consistency. We also
for
see
its
some
visual
fidelity on the
fidelity
back of Barrett's vest in one shot of the opening cutscene. The texture detail here is distorted and doesn't render with the same detail as on base PS5, though in other shots, the vest looks fine. Areas with a more subtle depth of field effect don't render correctly either, which is very likely an artifact of the upscaling process.
Ooh, that's not good.
Also seems to have a tendency
this game has really good depth of field and it uses it a lot.
I imagine it's not very noticeable during typical gameplay and could easily be obscured by motion blur or a slightly laggy television panel, but it is noticeable in stopped or slow motion here. But the graphics mode on PS5 isn't exactly perfect either, presenting foliage with a bit of a dithery look when the camera isn't quite still.
What this essentially is showing too is it's showing the downsides of PSSR, like its weaknesses essentially. Right? So, I mean, I guess that's gonna show in other games. That's definitely probably going to show in other games. Hopefully hopefully this is like an older build though.
Looks a bit choppy because of its lack of camera motion blur. I'd really prefer camera-based motion blur was added to the game, and its absence is especially felt in the graphics mode. Both machines look fine here with a similar enough rendition of particles.
That was the only thing that the graphics mode didn't have was camera motion blur.
Is that the PS5 Pro just isn't that temporally stable relative to the base machine in its graphics mode. In shots with fairly
it would have been useful in the open world. I think in more enclosed areas it was fine.
At least relative to the graphics mode. The image stability overall is more similar to the old performance mode. I don't think this is anything like a deal breaker here, but the general instability of the image is the biggest sticking point if you are measuring it up against its full-res PS5 counterpart.
I see.
Here, solutions like DLSS and XeSS typically deliver more temporally stable results. The brief snippets of Ratchet and Clank that we have appear to
it's good to have this video. This is like the stuff, this is what Sony should have done. They should have just actually shown
overall, I think image quality is similarly
like
good
a thorough, they should have presented a thorough showing of this upscaler.
The Pro definitely gives you greater image detail, but it comes at the cost of more temporal instability. But the fact that
because now I have a much better idea of
really speaks
what
to the
weaknesses this
promise of
upscaler
PSSR
actually
over the
has
Pro more
and what it's
generally.
good at.
This is basically exactly as Mark Cerny claimed. The Pro provides the high-quality graphics that the PS5 is capable of at 30 FPS, but at the higher frame rates that gamers typically prefer. That very effective use of PSSR here, though, does make you wonder a bit about the possibilities for mode selection on PS5 Pro. I think it would be perfectly sensible to only offer this 4K-like 60 FPS mode on Pro consoles, but if Square Enix did ship a 30 FPS mode as well, they'd probably have a fair bit of GPU time left over to enhance the game's visual presentation, plus possibly some
interesting
GPU time afforded by adopting PSSR there as well.
I probably wouldn't play that mode, but that would be interesting for PC essentially if they
FF7 remake Part
do that. I don't think they're gonna do that though.
They are devoting their
I don't know. When it comes to this series, to be honest, not even the series, Square Enix in general, with their last few PC ports, they really have not been adding that extra juice.
Or might set some relatively hard limits on what can be realistically achieved.
So it's like
the graphics mode
they haven't been adding like a bunch of extra cool settings or any
PS5. So at least
maximum ultra plus like above console settings.
For a potential
the games look relatively close to their console counterparts on PC nowadays.
As a final note here, I wanted to take a look at performance. The PS5 in its performance mode generally ran at 60 FPS, but could suffer from occasional dips in especially heavy cutscenes or battle sequences. We do see a relatively minor drop in the opening cutscene here, and then a more significant decline later in the second fight sequence. Graphics mode suffers fewer dips, but does drop some frames in that second fight as well.
I didn't even know
PS5 Pro doesn't appear to suffer from the same issues. There are a couple of one-off dropped frames.
I didn't know that 60 FPS mode had drops.
Immediately following a camera cut or 2 frames after, but you would be very hard-pressed to notice in actual play. Elsewhere, the game is locked at 60 FPS, even in the second fight scene, which is quite demanding. It seems likely that the GPU was becoming overburdened with alpha before, but the Pro is fine here. Judging from the available footage, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth's PS5 Pro upgrade seems very effective. It's a lot like what we'd expect from some of the better Xbox One X upgrades, which took 1080p games often to a full 4K. The native resolution here is far lower, but the perceived resolution is right about there, if not even a bit better defined than some native 4K games with TAA. My only real concerns here, outside of some quibbles with the current version of PSSR, come down to the likelihood that Rebirth's lighting issues will go unaddressed. It's great to present vast seas of foliage to
that's the problem. It's essentially them just using the upscaler and that's it.
Likewise,
Rebirth had a bunch of other rendering issues that could have
lighting, some
even
shots
helped
appear somewhat basic.
with the
On the flip side,
with a
the game
PS5 Pro
has some soaring visual
with better
highs,
hardware.
like its real-time cutscenes, and those seem to look pretty amazing on the Pro, with smooth frame rates married with impressive image detail. Realistically, squeezing this level of improvement out of the Pro console at this early stage feels like an impressive achievement and perhaps a sign of greater things to come as developers get to grips with the Pro hardware. So if you've been waiting to play Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, it may be worth waiting a couple
I guess that's the
months
good thing. At least
because
this is
PS5
still
Pro
early
seems like
on.
the best place to play the Square Enix epic
Things can change a
launch.
lot and can get a
It's
lot better.
remarkable visual turnaround. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and press the bell for YouTube notifications. Check out the Patreon.
Much better idea.
For exclusive and early
How this
access
game is actually gonna look on
and
the Pro.
to get in touch, use social media.
This is a good video though. This 15-minute video was actually better than the entire presentation that Sony did. Hopefully there are bigger differences that they can implement later on. It's definitely possible. It's definitely possible. Especially if they want to use the Pro as a way to maybe adapt to the PC version, because they would essentially have 2 versions of the game running. They would have the base version and the upgraded version, and those upgraded settings that are seen on a Pro could be used for a PC version. It seems like Oliver has like a great understanding of this game and its issues particularly. I'm glad they had him review this situation particularly, because it seems like he definitely played through this game and is like, oh, he sees the exact problems that this game had in terms of its like rendering issues. I think that might be all I gotta say on this, actually. Hopefully they show more changes. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you on the next one.